Anyway, I can't go on with you anymore. Look at me now. I've got a mistress 10 years younger than me who just had my baby. Go ahead and get out. Let's get a divorce.
I gave a smirk at those words. The truth was, I had been planning to bring up the subject of divorce myself, but it was Kevin who had brought it up first. To make matters worse, he had been having an affair with a hostess and even had a child. This was truly a perfect opportunity for me. Fine, here are the divorce papers. I took the divorce papers I had already prepared out of my bag and handed them to Kevin. After telling him I had already filled in my part, I headed straight to my parents' house to consult my father about something. The next day, when I returned to Kevin with my father, just as I expected, my father-in-law, John, was scolding him harshly.
You know what you've done? If you betray Ashley, you'll have to give up this shop too.
What do you mean by that?
Kevin seemed not to understand. He didn't know what my role in this shop was. I am Ashley Smith, 35 years old. Currently, I help out at the restaurant I married into. My mother passed away when I was young, and I was raised in a single-parent household by my father. I had worked part-time at this restaurant since my university days. At that time, Kevin, who worked as the successor to the shop, confessed his feelings for me and we started dating. However, Kevin, who was the same age as me, started working at the restaurant right after high school, but he was often absent. It wasn't that he was physically weak, but he would take off 2 to 3 days a week. Eventually, I had to fill in for him, and as a result, I was liked by the store manager and his wife, who were now my in-laws. Then, before I graduated from university, Kevin proposed to me, and my in-laws were thrilled that I would become their daughter-in-law. Although Kevin was unreliable, I loved his kind personality, and I respected my in-laws as I had worked with them for 4 years at the restaurant. I had actually planned to help my father with his business after graduation, but after consulting with him, I decided to marry and help out at the restaurant. However, after we got married, Kevin completely changed from the kind person I knew. He began to treat me, his wife, with disdain, as though I was beneath him.
I'm the successor to this restaurant. Eventually, I'll be the manager. So as my wife, you should follow all my orders here.
I was shocked when he said this on our first day back to work after the wedding. Had the Kevin I knew before marriage been a facade all along? What's going on with you, Kevin? I know your father is the manager of this shop, and one day you'll take over, but that's still a long way off. At the time, we were both 23, and my in-laws were around 50. It seemed too early to consider Kevin as the future manager. But no matter what I said, Kevin wouldn't listen.
Even though we're young, we're already married. So Ashley, you need to stop thinking like you're still just a part-timer and start acting like my wife and doing things as I say.
He said he was the successor, and now that he had a wife, he wanted to be the center of running the shop. I didn't know Kevin had such an old-fashioned mindset. But the thing was, the shop was. No, if I said that, he would probably just get defensive. I felt it would be better not to hurt his pride, seeing how he had completely changed after marriage. So, I decided to follow his orders for the time being. Since then, I thought I'd be trained on the job, but Kevin simply made me do all the menial tasks. He barely did any work himself, just ordered me to do the cleaning and washing dishes. My in-laws would scold him, but Kevin just arrogantly ignored them.
Ashley has become part of the family. Of course, she has to work hard.
Sitting with his arms crossed, Kevin said this. and my in-laws just looked at him in disbelief.
That's such an old-fashioned way of thinking. Ashley has been doing just fine.
That's right. If you keep saying things like that, even Ashley will give up.
I felt deeply grateful for my in-laws' support. But Kevin didn't listen to them and suddenly shouted angrily.
Shut up. If you keep spoiling Ashley like this, she'll turn into a worthless wife. Marriage is all about setting things straight from the start.
With that, Kevin stormed out of the store. My in-laws sighed deeply and came over to me.
Ashley, I don't know how to apologize. Our only son, we spoiled him, and now you're suffering because of it.
No, please, don't bow down, John. When I get home, I'll talk things through with Kevin again. I think he has his own reasons for doing what he's doing. I was overwhelmed by my in-laws' repeated apologies, and I tried my best to make things settle down peacefully. After cleaning up the shop with my in-laws, I quickly made my way home. But when I entered the house, another shocking sight awaited me. Kevin, apparently upset about what had happened earlier, was drinking heavily. The living room was overflowing with empty beer cans and scattered snack bags.
It's your fault I couldn't stop drinking. Clean this all up and get it done. If you don't, you won't be allowed to sleep.
I can't. Cleaning all of this up at once is impossible. I glanced around the living room and said that. The mess was so overwhelming, it almost made me dizzy just by looking at it. How could he possibly have eaten and drunk so much in just a few hours? Seeing the anxious expression on my face, Kevin shouted back at me.
What are you talking about? It's the wife's job to clean the house, right? I'm the head of this family, so I don't do any of the household chores.
In front of my in-laws, he said he was the successor and I was the wife. But at home, he acted like the head of the household and dumped all the household chores on me. I couldn't stand this life anymore. I spent that evening cleaning the living room, but the next day, I consulted my in-laws. We decided that living with Kevin alone wasn't going to work, and I would move in with my in-laws. They were so kind, dividing the housework among the three of us, excluding Kevin, and it was a huge help. But Kevin seemed to feel left out, and he began staying out more and more at night. Days went by, and despite being married for several years, we still didn't have children. Even though we worked together, once the workday was done, Kevin wouldn't come home. My in-laws, concerned, said to me,
We can't keep going like this. You're still young, Ashley. Maybe it's time to cut ties with that guy and live your life freely.
That's right. Ashley, are you staying with Kevin because you're worried about us? If that's the case, don't worry about us. You should think about your own happiness more.
I felt so touched by their thoughtfulness. Indeed, there were times I had considered divorce. But I couldn't betray my kind in-laws who had treated me so well. John, Susan, thank you. But even though Kevin stays out a lot, he's doing a better job at work than before. So I think he's starting to feel the responsibility of being the successor. That's why I want to believe in him and continue supporting him. My in-laws were moved to tears by my words. Kevin had indeed stopped taking so many days off from work compared to before marriage. If I kept believing in him, the times he stayed out would eventually decrease. For the sake of my kind in-laws, I would continue to do my best as a wife. I thought this way and kept trying. But from a certain day onward, Kevin's heart seemed to drift further and further away from me. It was around the time we had been married for 12 years. My father-in-law was over 60 now, and it was time to pass on the position of manager to Kevin. Kevin was thrilled to become the manager, but as soon as he did, He started leaving the shop during work hours and going off somewhere. He hired more employees than before, and after my father-in-law stepped down as manager, most of the shop's work was left to my in-laws, while Kevin only did the minimum work before leaving the shop. This marked the beginning of our new life. Kevin began going out frequently, day and night. Where could he be going? Every day, I worked hard with my in-laws and the new employees, finishing up the day exhausted. By the time I got home, everyone was too tired to do anything. We would eat takeout together, take a bath, and immediately go to bed. The days just kept repeating. Kevin was in charge of the household finances, so I barely had any money of my own to spend. I didn't want to burden my in-laws with unnecessary worries, so I never discussed money matters with them. Why did I even get married? For the past 12 years, I've just been enduring and dedicating myself to the restaurant. Even I, at this point, was beginning to feel like I had reached my limit. This can't continue like this. I've decided that it's time to take action and think about the future. I was thinking this when, one day, after finishing work and leaving the restaurant, my phone rang. It was Kevin. When I picked up, he asked,
Today, my mom and dad are going to their relative's house, right?
"Yes, but why do you ask?"
Actually, I need to talk to you. Come to the place I'm about to tell you. Oh, and keep it a secret from my parents.
I wondered if he had something he didn't want my in-laws to know. Kevin spoke in a low voice, as if he didn't want anyone around to hear. I asked him what it was, but he said he'd explain later, so I headed to the place he told me. When I arrived at the meeting spot, Kevin was waving at me, saying, "Over here." There was another woman with him, holding a newborn baby. Who could she be? She looked to be in her mid-20s, and then it hit me. Could she possibly be? Before I could ask, Kevin spoke first.
Actually, this is Amy. She's been working at the nightclub I've been going to for the past 2 years. And well, this baby is mine.
What? For a moment, I couldn't process what Kevin had said, and everything around me went dark. Then the woman, Amy, looked at me and suddenly shouted at me.
You didn't hear me? Are you hard of hearing? I'm the one who had Kevin's baby. You must have heard me now that I'm saying it so loudly.
There was no need to shout so loudly. It made me feel like I was being looked down upon, and it irritated me. Yes, I understand. It's just, I couldn't process it all at once when you said something like that. As I spoke, I slowly began to regain my composure. I turned to Kevin and began questioning him for more details. Is she one of the girls who works at the nightclub? Does that mean she's a hostess? You've been going to a place like that without coming home? Kevin avoided my gaze, his face showing a bitter expression. After thinking for a moment, he reluctantly opened his mouth.
Well, it couldn't be helped. You were always so focused on the restaurant. And when I came home, you were always close with my parents. I felt left out all the time. So, I worked hard to make money to go out and distract myself.
What? The restaurant belongs to the whole family, so of course we should all help out and work together. And your parents have always treated me well, so I've gotten along with them. You really thought like that? I could only feel despair towards Kevin. We had all worked together to support the restaurant, and I had gotten along with my in-laws. And yet, he was unhappy about it all. As I looked at Kevin with eyes full of despair, he responded with an almost defiant tone.
Anyway, I can't do this anymore. Now look at me. I've got a mistress 10 years younger than me who had my baby. Get out and let's get a divorce.
I couldn't help but give a smug smile at his words. The truth is, I had been planning to bring up divorce myself, but Kevin beat me to it. Of all things, he had an affair with a nightclub staff member and even had a child with her. This was truly a perfect opportunity for me. Fine, here are the divorce papers. I took out the divorce papers I had already prepared from my bag and handed them to Kevin. He looked at them for a moment, then widened his eyes, but quickly regained his composure and grinned.
Oh, you're prepared, huh? So you've already decided that you can't go on with me either.
Maybe. I'm not sure. But if you regret it later, that's on you.
Huh? What do you mean by that?
Kevin looked at me with a puzzled expression, but I had no intention of answering his question. Then Amy interrupted with a sarcastic smile.
Isn't that just a case of sour grapes? You don't have kids, so you're just jealous.
Kevin, in response, laughed and said, I see. I thought to myself, let them laugh as much as they want for now. With that, I left them with one last statement. I've already filled in my part on the divorce papers, so make sure to sign and submit them soon. Goodbye. Kevin tilted his head slightly as he watched me leave. I wondered if he thought things were settled, as he didn't say anything in response and looked relieved. I then went straight to my dad. Normally, I would have stopped to say goodbye to my in-laws, but I thought it was better to consult with my reliable dad first. It had been a while since I had been back home. We were both so busy that we hardly ever contacted each other. I rang the doorbell and my dad opened the front door. He looked at me with a puzzled expression and said,
What's going on, Ashley? At this hour?
Sorry, Dad. Actually, there's something I need to talk to you about.
Don't you have work tomorrow? Well, it seems like something's going on, so come in and I'll listen.
Since it was unusual for me to show up unannounced, my dad must have sensed that something was wrong. After being let inside, I took a deep breath and waited until I was calm before starting to speak. I hadn't had a chance to talk to my dad in a long time, so I had to start from a long time ago. First, I told him about Kevin starting to leave the house often after we began living with my in-laws. Then I explained that since becoming manager a few months ago, he had been absent from work more often, and that he had fathered a child with his mistress. As I explained all of this, I could feel my dad's expression slowly hardening. Among all of this, the moment my dad looked the most upset was when I mentioned the affair. Once my dad realized something, he took a deep breath to calm himself. It seemed like he was trying to gather his thoughts. After a moment, my dad, having regained his composure, said calmly,
Well then, tomorrow morning, let's go to that shop and talk things out with Kevin. We'll need his parents involved as well.
I'd appreciate that. I'm really glad I talked to you, Dad. You're the only one who can think things through calmly in situations like this. I was truly grateful to have such a dependable dad. The next morning, I went with my dad to my in-laws' shop. Since they were still setting up, we tried to enter through the back door, but we could hear my in-laws talking from inside.
What? You're getting a divorce?
And you had an affair and even had a kid with that woman?
It seemed that my in-laws had already heard about it. Amy was probably inside too. If that's the case, it worked out perfectly for us. My dad and I stood quietly outside the back door, listening to their conversation.
Don't get so angry, both of you. For 12 years, we couldn't have kids. Honestly, you should be thankful that you let me keep that wife in your house for this long.
That's right. John, Susan, I've had Kevin's child, so I'll be a good wife. Please, look after us from now on.
It seemed Amy was definitely there. I exchanged a knowing look with my dad and gave a slight grin. Then, my father-in-law said something that delivered a decisive blow to Kevin.
Do you understand what you've done? If you betray Ashley, you'll have to give up this shop too.
Huh? What do you mean by that?
Kevin responded in a feigned, confused tone, and my father-in-law, clearly disappointed, replied.
You didn't know? Ashley is.
Before my father-in-law could finish, my dad knocked on the back door, signaling that it was time to go in. It was my mom who opened the door.
Oh, the president. And Ashley is with you too, Mr. Smith.
No, please don't be so formal, Susan. I'm sorry to interrupt you while you're busy.
No, it's all right. I don't know how to apologize for all of this. I'm truly sorry.
My father-in-law came out to the back door while saying this, bowing deeply. Kevin, still not fully understanding what was happening, looked at us with a confused expression and asked my in-laws.
What's going on with you two? Sure, I might have done something wrong, but there's no need to bow down like that.
Idiot. Ashley's father is the president of the restaurant chain we run. Didn't you know that?
That's right. Originally, Ashley was supposed to join her father's company after she graduated from university. She worked part-time at our restaurant to learn the ropes. And then you fell in love with her and insisted on marrying her, so we asked her father to let her come work here.
At this point, my mother-in-law broke down in tears. Now that I think about it, when I was still working part-time, Kevin hardly ever worked and didn't even know that I was the president's daughter. I never told him because I didn't want to seem like I was bragging, so I kept it to myself. Kevin, busy with his own affairs, must not have even noticed what my dad did for a living during our wedding preparations. Normally, this wouldn't be the case, but considering Kevin's self-centered personality, it was entirely possible. When he became the manager, he left all the difficult procedures to my father-in-law and never even showed his face at the company headquarters. Had he even visited the company once, he would have met Amy and couldn't have had an affair. As I thought about this, I glanced at Amy's face. She was still trembling as she looked at my dad. My dad had known Amy was there from the beginning, but now, pretending to notice her, he spoke to her.
Hey, aren't you Amy from our accounting department? What are you doing here?
Oh, now that you mention it, I thought I'd seen you somewhere before. You're from my dad's company?
Yes, well,
Hearing this, Kevin, shocked, turned to Amy and asked,
What? How is she an employee at the headquarters? You were working at a nightclub, weren't you?
Amy quickly shushed him, trying to silence him. Of course. My dad's company prohibits side jobs, and on top of that, if she's working at a nightclub, there's no way she'd avoid strict consequences. My dad turned to Amy with a stern expression and asked,
Well, this is problematic. Didn't you say you couldn't work overtime because you had to care for your mother? I didn't know you were working at a place like that. If you needed money for caregiving, you should have found a more respectable part-time jobs. By the way, whose child is that?
Pointing at the baby Amy was holding, my father gave a smirk. Was that baby really Amy's child with Kevin? I was stunned. Dad, what do you mean by that?
What do I mean? I've never seen Amy pregnant since she joined the company, so I was wondering whose child it was.
I couldn't believe it. Kevin, meanwhile, seemed to want to say, "Oh," and was looking down, covering his face with one hand. What is that supposed to mean? So, whose child is this? It's not yours, Kevin?
Well, it's,
Kevin's response was so unclear that my frustration reached its peak. I was about to press him further when a phone rang loudly. It was Amy's phone, the one she was holding while cradling the baby. A woman used to childcare could probably pull out her phone while holding a baby. But Amy was clearly flustered and didn't know what to do. Kevin, also unsure if the baby was his, didn't even offer to help. My mother-in-law, making a "what can you do" face, walked over, took the baby from Amy, and only then did Amy answer the phone. As soon as she hit the answer button, a loud voice echoed, audible to everyone around.
Amy, where are you? I told you to have the baby back by 10 a.m. today.
I'm sorry, Mary. I'll bring him back right away.
Amy bowed repeatedly while talking on the phone. Now everything made sense, and everyone around us had a look of understanding. It turned out that Amy had been looking after a friend's child and had lied, claiming it was her own. But why would she do such a thing? I grabbed Kevin's arm, who was looking flustered, and demanded an explanation. "Kevin, why did you lie about this child being yours? You better explain yourself." Kevin's face had gone completely pale. Amy, as if to rescue him, interjected with a smug look.
You're annoying. You didn't have any kids for 12 years, and now you're acting all high and mighty. If it were me, I could have as many kids as I wanted if I were with Kevin.
So, what exactly were you trying to accomplish by using someone else's child? I was really fed up with these two. They didn't need to go through all these elaborate lengths. If Kevin had just said he wanted to break up because he found someone else, I would have accepted it. Kevin, perhaps sensing what I was thinking, started to defend why he lied.
well, if I just asked for a divorce, you wouldn't have listened, right? So, I thought if I said I had a kid, you'd give up and leave.
Kevin's overly confident explanation made me want to laugh out loud. To bring someone else's child into this and put on such a performance, he really was making a mountain out of a molehill. Are you seriously this naive? The reason we didn't have kids in these 12 years is because you barely ever came home. You neglected me so much that even if you had said you wanted a divorce, I wouldn't have cared to keep you around. At this point, the baby's real mother must have been furious. When I glanced at Amy, she was still staring at her phone with a blank expression. It seemed she had forgotten something important, so I decided to speak up. "Well, it looks like you've already filed the divorce papers, so go ahead and get remarried if you want. But don't you think you should return the kid to Mary soon?"
Oh, right.
Amy suddenly shouted, as if she had just remembered, and then a loud voice echoed from her phone.
Enough. I'm coming over there, so tell me where you are. Did you forget the call's still active? I've heard everything. How dare you use my child for something like this?
Oh no, I messed up.
Amy seemed like quite the airhead. Kevin, trying to calm her down, put a hand on her shoulder.
Come on, calm down, Amy. We can get married now, and I'll make sure to take care of you as the manager's wife.
Amy smiled, her mood lightening at his words, but she still hadn't noticed the piercing glares coming from everyone around her. Feeling that Amy was not someone with whom any productive conversation could happen, my father-in-law looked at Kevin and stated the facts clearly.
Kevin, as you know, this restaurant was originally opened by me as a Western-style restaurant. But due to financial difficulties, We couldn't keep it running. That's when Ashley's father stepped in and helped us turn it into a restaurant chain. So, if you divorce Ashley, this place is done for.
What? What do you mean the restaurant is closing? Then what happens to me?
Kevin's face began to pale. But as he showed a sad expression, my father said calmly,
No, the restaurant will continue, John.
Kevin's face lit up when he heard my father's words.
Wait, really? That's great. Wow, the president is so generous. You know, work and family matters are totally separate, right?
He said this while celebrating with Amy, both of them holding hands. However, the celebration was short-lived. My father, smiling wryly, turned to Kevin and said,
Kevin, I think you're misunderstanding something. The restaurant will continue, but it'll be your parents who keep running it. They're still in their 60s, young enough to handle it. And since it became part of our chain, your parents have been doing an excellent job. Unfortunately, you'll have to leave.
That's right. I assume you weren't thinking of working under your ex-wife, were you? I'll be taking over the company as my father's right hand, so there's no way I'm leaving a betrayer like you in charge here. My father and I, now firmly attacking him, left Kevin completely speechless. Then my father also gave Amy a stern warning.
And Amy, you should already know this, but we can't continue employing someone who's violating company policy by working a side job at a night establishment. So you'll have to leave the company as well.
With both Kevin and Amy facing unemployment, I couldn't help but wonder how they would survive. Amy's face started to turn pale. Kevin, seeing her like this, looked at her with concern and said,
Amy, are you okay? I'll do anything for you. Even if we get kicked out of this place, I'll find us a good job somewhere else. Don't worry about it.
He reached out to touch her, but Amy quickly swatted his hand away.
Shut up. Who would want to deal with a washed-up guy like you who's been fired? I only stayed with you because I thought being a restaurant chain manager meant good money, but I don't need you anymore.
Amy had finally dropped her facade. As we were about to leave the restaurant, Amy's senior, Mary, came rushing over.
Give me my kid back. I knew something was off. When I heard that my husband's parents had collapsed and I needed to go to the in-laws' house, I thought it was strange that Amy would suddenly offer to look after my child.
With complaints flying, Mary pulled her by the arm while cradling the child in the other. Amy would have to pay for the emotional distress caused by her affair. But according to my dad, they had Amy's phone number and her family's contact information saved at the company. So I decided to let this one go for now and reach out to Amy later. Of course, I did eventually receive the affair settlement from Kevin. And my in-laws made it clear that Kevin was no longer their son, disowning him. Even then, Kevin, with nowhere else to go, desperately fought back.
Dad, Mom, do you really not care what happens to me? I'm your only son.
But no matter how hard he tried, my in-laws were firm in their decision. In the end, Kevin left the house in tears. But how long would he keep this up? Kevin showed up at my house, begging me to reconcile.
Ashley, I was wrong. I'll never cheat again, and I'll treat you better from now on. Please, give me another chance. I'm begging you, please.
He was already back at his family home, kneeling and begging. Reconcile? Of course, that's impossible. Why don't you go back to Amy?
No, I went to see her, but
With his head down, he began talking about Amy with a somber expression. Apparently, after Amy had been dragged away by her senior that day, she had ended up at the police station. Mary, who worked at the same nightclub, had been contacted about her husband's parents collapsing. Normally indifferent, Amy suddenly said, "I'll watch the kid," and promised to take care of the child until the next morning while Mary went to her in-laws. It seemed that Amy had mistaken the time, thinking Mary wouldn't return until the morning, and had kept the child with her, using it as part of her plan to secure her marriage to Kevin. Had she really thought that no one would find out the truth later? She wouldn't have been forgiven by my in-laws if they found out the child wasn't hers. Such a foolish move. Mary, claiming that taking the child was an act of abduction, took Amy to the police.
Apparently, after being interrogated, she was released quickly. But when I went to see her, she threw things at me and told me never to come back, saying it would just remind her of unpleasant memories. She kept mocking me for being jobless, but after that, she was singled out by her senior coworkers, had to quit the nightclub, and now she's unemployed too. No one is going to deal with someone like that.
Kevin said this with a grimace, as if chewing on a bitter pill. I sighed deeply, replying, "So, you came to me because you have nowhere else to go."
Goodbye then. Do you want me to throw something at you again, or are you going to leave?
My dad, holding a large amount of salt behind me, turned to Kevin and said,
Bob, salt? I'm not a slug.
It's just a joke, but I've already contacted the lawyer. I've asked for a restraining order to make sure you stop harassing Ashley. Now, if you understand, get out of here. I'll really throw the salt at you.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Kevin, sweating nervously, fled in a hurry. My dad, who is usually calm, can be pretty intimidating when angry. Afterward, I contacted Amy using the phone number we had saved from the company to demand compensation for emotional distress. In the end, Kevin ran back to Amy. When I brought up the topic of the settlement with Amy, she said, "I'm unemployed, so I don't have the money for that. On top of that, now I have a freeloading man living with me." So, I contacted Amy's parents and demanded the settlement from them instead. Her parents came to our house right away, apologizing profusely. They agreed to pay the settlement in advance. And while I will make sure Amy pays it back over time, I told them that she will never set foot in our house again. Kevin and Amy. Both of them were unemployed, and on top of that, Amy would now have to repay her parents for the settlement. It was clear that they would have to live in poverty for a while. Now that everything had been resolved, I made a request to my dad. I asked him to keep me as a staff member at the chain restaurant where my former in-laws worked. They had done so much for me over the years, and I wanted to give back. I thought it might be a difficult request, considering I was set to take over, but my father agreed without hesitation.
Of course. I figured you'd say that. I'll make sure to pick a good successor from the team.
Are you sure, Dad?
Yeah, I'm still young, so there's no need for a successor right away. I'll keep going strong for a while. Don't worry, Ashley. Just do what you want.
My dad answered with a smile. Tears began to well up in my eyes. Thank you, Dad. I returned to the restaurant where I had worked for so long. My former in-laws. No, the manager and his wife were overjoyed and in tears.
Ashley, thank you for coming back. We've caused you so much trouble because of that son of ours.
No. No matter how tough things got, I could get through it thanks to both of you. From now on, think of me as your daughter, and please let me continue working with you.
Are you sure you really want that? We couldn't be more grateful. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Tears filled my mother-in-law's eyes. I had worked hard at this restaurant since my student days. There have been many happy times and many tough ones. And from now on, I want to continue living with these two people who have taken such good care of me.